Barry Sonnenfeld, you have brought Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events to the small screen, so to speak. I'd like to go to that and talk us through the process of bringing that back to life.
Well, I was for a while the director of the original movie. Our producer left. Paramount wanted a partner. The partner didn't sort of want me. So I left the show. Daniel left the show. Daniel Handler, the creator of the books. And that's where it laid. And then for a decade, that's where it was. And then Paramount decided not to make any more of the feature films, and Netflix bought the rights to Daniel's original. And Jim Carrey's manager, I feel like that weird thing where reporters, kids come in the back. My dog has just brought me a bone that he wants me to help him. But in any case, Jim Carrey's manager is a guy named Jimmy Miller, and Jimmy Miller knew how much I loved the underlying material, called me, said Netflix bought it, got me into a meeting with Netflix, and I convinced Netflix why I was the right guy to direct their show. At the time, I was not hired on to be the showrunner, but that's what ended up happening.
And what about the process of, you were obviously involved in the film from about 15, 16 years ago when Jim was the lead of that. Talk us through the differences between your involvement then and your involvement now.
Netflix is a very different studio than Paramount. Netflix really, truly believes in the sort of creative viability of directors and producers and writers and showrunners. So the difference is Netflix really embraced my ideas, loved some of the suggestions. Like, I felt it was very important that Lemony Snicket be an on-camera presence, not just sort of a narrator that you cut to occasional typewriter. I felt it was very important that we control every piece of it and that we film it on stages. I felt the movie, although good, was much bigger in scale and scope than I felt we should have. I wanted a much more intimate situation. So Netflix is a very different studio. They the creative team.
The casting is pretty genius. Talk us through the process of casting Neil Patrick Harris in the lead.
I had been at Thanksgiving a couple of years, Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos' house, and Neil Patrick Harris was there, and I had just signed on to do the Netflix show. I wasn't even sure we were going to go ahead with it. And I said to Neil, listen, if we ever do this show, I can't tell you, but you'd be perfect for it. And he said, okay, you can't show, but I'll be perfect for it, sure. And that was the last we spoke about it until we got the green light from Netflix. Daniel Handler brought up Neil Patrick Harris's name, and I remembered that I had already offered Neil the part 2 years earlier at Thanksgiving. So he's truly fantastic in the show. I really didn't know just what a brilliant, funny, creative actor he was capable of. I'd seen a lot of his work and Tony Award performances, but he's truly brilliant. And the day we had reads for the first season, he had his Olaf voice, his Shirley voice, his Stefano voice. So we already knew at the table reads what he was going to bring to this.
Yeah, you know, he does bring something different. He's got big shoes to fill, like Jim Carrey. He's an icon. Did you get any sense from Neil that he had any reservations or any issues in terms of how to make this character work for him?
Shockingly, I thought there would be a lot of concerns with Neil because Jim had done it in the movie. And when Neil signed on, I don't even think Neil had seen the movie. And when he did see the movie, and I said, don't watch the movie. I don't want you to do the same thing. I don't want you to worry about it. And he said, no, I can handle it. And he watched the movie and he said, yeah, that was that. I'm me, that was Jim, and in no way was he concerned about filling those shoes.
So what would you say is your primary challenge in taking on the project? Like the number one thing you think, geez, that was really difficult?
Well, I'll tell you, it's quite simple. You know, each book is 2 episodes. And so that means that season we did 8 episodes and we did 4 books. We shot everything on stage except parts of Miserable Mill. We basically had 1/10 of the budget and 1/4 of the amount of days to shoot 4 feature films, basically, because each 2-hour segment, or let's say between an hour and a half and 2 hours for these 2 books, was like a feature. It looks like a feature. There are no standing sets. Every new book, we throw out all the old sets. The only set that we have that we repeat is Mr. Poe's office, which is a bunch of file cabinets in a narrow room. So every 22, 23 days, we are shooting another, and everyone expects it to look as good as a feature film. So the huge challenge is 1/10 the budget, 1/4 the amount of days, and make it look like it could be.
You know, I always ask this question, and I'm curious. It's a general open question, but what did you hope to get out of the experience in terms of, like, what was your number one goal, and did that meet your expectations?
I love the books. The books posit that all children are bright and capable, and all adults, whether they mean well or they're evil, are equally sort of inept. And I grew up with 2 horrible parents who meant well but were inept. And so the book spoke to me and about my childhood. There were evil people in my life. There were nice people in my life, but they were equally ineffectual in helping me grow up. So for me, the challenge was making Daniel's books come to life in a way that were visual, that weren't as sort of wordy as his books, but also focus as much on the children, because the children are the soul of the show. And I really love this. I must say, I feel it's my best work. You know, I directed the Men in Black movies and Addams Family and Addams Family Values and Pushing Daisies and Get Shorty. But for me, A Series of Unfortunate Events comes the closest to what I imagined it would be, and then executing it to very closely, almost exactly what I expected and wanted it to be.
Now that's got to be a very good feeling.
It's a great feeling, and I got to say, you know, I had a lot of support. I get to work with Bo Welch, one of the great production designers. Bernard Coutard, who is not only the cinematographer, but the only nice person from Quebec I've ever met. So that's amazing that this could be that talented and that lovely. Rose Lamb is our producer who deals with all the money issues, and she's been incredibly supportive. Daniel Handler and Joe Trace have been the 2 main writers of the first and second seasons. And finally, and I know I've mentioned this already, but Netflix is I say to all my filmmaker friends, get some sort of show on at Netflix, because they really are different.
It's Netflix is the future of TV. There's so many creative people who are moving to Netflix, aren't there? And there's a good reason for that.
There is a good reason. You know, you won't make as much money. There's no back end, but in return, you get the creative freedom to do the work you want to do, and that's spectacular. And not only in television, but I think, you know, in features as well.
Yeah. With the Barry Sonnenfeld project, for me at least, a lot of that, what I look for and expect, is really amazing design. Like, you've got an eye for that, obviously, if you look at your body of work. Why is that? Is it just because the people that you bring on? It can't just be that. It has to be something innate that you have as a visionary, as a director, as a creator.
Well, I don't want to use words like visionary to describe myself, but I'll say that I grew up as an only child. I spent a great deal of time in my bedroom playing with my dinosaurs and my car collection. And I was never interested in film. I was very interested, however, in still photography. And early in my teens, I developed a very specific viewpoint, which is that I fell in love with very wide angle lenses, shooting stills. I fell in love with sort of a tableau, a very sort of parallel to the horizon is parallel to the frame. And so for me, I think I come into the visual world through still photography. I remember when I went to graduate film school, and I did it only because I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. And my mother said, go to graduate film school, I'll pay for your education. And I thought, great, 3 years where I don't have to grow up, and she'll pay for it. And then, of course, the day I told my parents I got into film school, they said, we have no money, so you're going to have to take out student loans. So I ended up paying for it anyway. But I did discover, even at film school, that I loved this sort of very tableau, wide-angle feel. And starting with the Coen brothers, you know, I never used to let Joel and Ethan pan. I shot their first 3 movies, Simple, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing. And we would always either dolly in or track, but we would never pan. And part of the reason I do a lot of dolly ins and pullbacks is because with a wide angle lens, everything is in focus. So you want to tell the audience where to look. So by using this lens, I'm forcing them to look where I want them to. And I always felt, because I'm an only child, because the camera was a character in our movies, whether it's, you know, Raising Arizona or now in these shows. So for me, the camera has always been another character that the audience is invited, it's sort of their visual narrator as opposed to their visual recording device.
You know, a lot of people probably don't know how many films you did lens as a cinematographer before you moved into directing. Like, I forgot about When Harry Met Sally and Big and Misery, one of my favorite all-time films, and the Coen brothers' early work. Do you think that your involvement or your work in cinematography at the beginning of your career has really informed the way you've become a director?
You know, I think it really has. You know, there were several other cinematographers that tried to become, and a lot of them didn't succeed. Greats who shot Godfather and a lot of the Woody Allen movies, directed a movie called Windows. Bill Fraker directed Lone Ranger many, many decades ago. John Alonzo, who shot Chinatown, also tried to direct a movie called FM. But in each case, they took their camera operator and moved them up to cinematographer, which meant they really didn't want to give up the role of cinematographer. So when Scott Rudin asked me to direct Addams Family, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I realized if I really wanted to be a director, I had to hire a cameraman that was so that he would force me away from the camera and force me to work with those horrible people that others call actors, who I now love, but at the time, those are the people that wouldn't hit their marks when I was a cinematographer, or they'd rehearse it looking this way, and I like that. The day after hair and makeup, they look this way. So I never really loved that. I became a director, so I hired the great cinematographers who shot, you know, French Connection and True Confessions and other movies. So I say, Bill, you should put a 10K there and put a double net there. So I was very lucky in that I had the right DP that I wouldn't want to be the DP on. And I worked with a lot of first-time directors. Joel and Ethan were first-timers on Blood Simple, although I was a first-timer on that as well. The first day on the set of Blood Simple was the first day that Joel, Ethan, or I had never, ever been on a movie. Worked our way up through any ranks. I was shooting documentaries, and Joel was cutting industrials, and Ethan was a statistical type of. But Danny DeVito was a first-time director when we did Throw Mama from the Train. Penny had directed half Jumpin' Jack Flash, but really was a first-time director when she did When Harry Met I'm sorry, Big, and another movie that I don't get credit for because I wasn't in the union, but I shot a movie for Phil Joannou called 3 O'Clock High, and that was the first movie that Phil had done as a feature. So I got to be known as a guy who was not only a cinematographer, but also I used to call myself the friend of the director. I would just as easily say to Rob Reiner, did they have more energy before lunch than I would, let's millimeter lens over here. So I was my role as a cinematographer.
Mm. And then when you moved into directing, you did get to direct some really massive hits. The Men in Black trilogy was huge, and box office wise, and in terms of the way that it kind of became part of the zeitgeist for a while. What was that like to be in that kind of realm?
You know, you never enjoy the moment when it's happening. You know, I look back, I always thought that I would be doing great work, and you know, and then sometimes you don't do great work, but you always hope that it will be good. I was very lucky with the Men in Black, the first one especially. David Koepp doesn't get credit, but he was a great help as a writer on that show. The studio and the producers wanted very much Chris O'Donnell to play the Will Smith part and Clint Eastwood to play the Tommy Lee Jones part. And my wife and I read scripts together. We get into bed, and she gives me about a 50-page head start because I'm a very slow reader. And I remember both of us reading Men in Black, and we both finished simultaneously, put the scripts down, looked at each other, and she said to me, Will Smith, and I said to her, Tommy Lee Jones. And at the time, Will had either not been in any features or was about to come out in 6 Degrees of Separation. And Spielberg really wanted Chris O'Donnell and told me that Chris was in LA and I happened to be in LA, and that I should go meet Chris at the Four Seasons for dinner and convince Chris to do the show. And we went and had dinner, and Chris said, you know, I'm not sure about the script. And I said, I'll tell you, not only is the script no good, but I'm not a very good director. And if I were you, I wouldn't do it. So Chris passed. And then I knew that Will Smith was in Philly at a wedding, and arranged for him to get on a helicopter and come visit me in East Hampton. I had never met Will, but Sweetie's, my wife, said it should be Will. So, you know, happy wife, happy life.
Absolutely.
So we got Will to meet Spielberg, and the rest is history.
Amazing. And you've done a lot of work with Will Smith, actually. What's he like as a leading man?
You know, he's really smart. He's really funny. He's really easy to be with. We spent a lot of time together on those 4 movies we did together. He's a filmmaker, and I'm sure that sooner than later he will become a director. I'm always saying to Will, before you become a director, do 4 comedies. I think he forgot how funny he is, and I'm always trying to make him do comedies, and he keeps not wanting to do that. But he'll direct soon, but I hope he does a few comedies first.
Yeah. You know, just moving off that completely different direction, you have had a lot of work on TV. Your Emmy-winning direction of Pushing Daisies, for me, was one of the highlights. That was a great like marriage, so to speak, of your aesthetic and Brian Fuller's aesthetic. And a lot of us really missed that show. But you won in, I think it was 2008, for directing the show's pilot. Can you talk us through that moment?
I was very proud of Pushing Daisies. When I read the script, I live in Telluride, Colorado now, and I read it in Telluride. I knew whoever got to direct Brian's work would have a good chance to get a show on the air. I just loved it. It was totally my sensibility. One of the things I love to do is world creation, whether it's Pushing Daisies or Addams Family or now A Series of Unfortunate Events. It very much feels like it's a unique world. You know, in the case of A Series of Unfortunate Events, does it take place in America? Is it somewhere in Europe. Is it now? Is it 50 years ago? Is it 40 years in the future? And so same with Pushing Daisies. You know, it's about a guy who can touch someone and bring them back from the dead. And so I loved the work. We had an amazing cast. You know, Brian is one of those writer showrunners that you actually, as a director, don't want to rehearse a scene without Brian being there. I'd be ready to rehearse the scene in the morning and I'd say, go get Brian. Because Brian could listen and I could say, can we lose these 6 lines? Didn't she say this in the previous scene? And Brian was totally unprecious in his work. So I loved working with him and I can't wait to work with him again. I think he's, did you just get a call?
No.
Okay. Oh, I'm talking very loud. I saw you touch your volume control.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay. Anyway, Brian is incredibly talented and I love the work. I was a award that year for directing and the Emmy. And I brought my daughter to the Emmy, took her out of school, boarding school for the night. We flew out to LA and then we had to get on and I also was afraid that they wouldn't let me on with the Emmy award because it's got like sharp points to get through security. So
the weapon.
Exactly. So I asked an agent if hold on to it for me and mail it to me. And then he held it ransom for about 6 months. He had it on his bookshelf. It was really exciting. I remember sitting right behind Colbert and Jon Stewart and asked them if they would let me be on their show if I won. But that didn't happen. But I was on Letterman 8 times, so that was highlight of my life.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I was thinking that if you weren't so busy on Lemony Snickets, you might be able to, you know, ask Brian to, you know, do some work on American Gods. You missed out, I think, on Hannibal, but that would have been a pretty interesting thing for you to do, I guess.
Too scary.
Yeah, too scary. Probably too scary. It's not quite your aesthetic.
I've never seen The Shining. I've never seen The Exorcist. I saw one episode of, I've never seen any episodes of Outer Limit. I saw one Rod Serling episode. I thought I can't watch that. Although Patrick Warburton plays Rod Serling in our show, but.
All right. Yeah. I think that touch is really good. I love how he just comes on screen, has a few things to say, and then kind of goes off. I think that's a very, very nice touch.
Yeah.
So given that you're working on season 2 and you've touched on how episodes are kind of parts of books, and so there aren't that many books. It is a finite limit. What will happen if you run out of books and the show continues, or do you have a plan for that?
The plan is to be 3 years. You know, if for the 3rd year, which I'm hopeful for, there are 13 books, which means either 25 or 20 episodes, so that's 3 years. At some point, the kids are going to be too old. And, you know, once they're emancipated, it's like they've got nothing to worry about. You know, Count Olaf becomes no longer a threat. There are certain characters that we all love, and we always joke about creating a spin-off. We love Mr. Poe. We love Larry the Waiter. You know, they're characters we just would love to see again in some other show. But we're planning on a 3-year run, and that's the end of it.
Okay, so you've got an end goal in mind. That's always a plus.
It is an end goal and also a great blueprint in Daniel's 13 books. So what that means basically, if Emmy voters really like the show, they don't have a lot of years to think about, well, we'll give it to Sonnenfeld in year 5. No. So they better sort of pony up right away.
They got to pony up now. So I hope they're paying attention. Barry, thanks a lot for bringing this to Netflix. It's a really good show to watch with my kids. I really appreciate that. And thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much, Rod.